Imagine this. It's November 25, 1988. In a quiet suburb of Tokyo called Misato, the afternoon unfolds as usual. Students are returning home, the streets are calm, and everything seems to pass like any other day. Among them is a 16-year-old girl named Junko Furuta, riding her bike, unaware that she is about to live her last day in freedom. In a moment that would forever change the course of her life, Junko is intercepted by a group of teenage boys. What seemed like a tasteless joke would turn into a 44-day nightmare marked by a level of cruelty that is impossible to comprehend. It's hard to imagine something so atrocious happening in a place where safety seemed guaranteed, where walking alone at night didn't inspire fear. But what happened to Junko shook an entire country and left an indelible scar on Japanese society. Before diving into the events, it's important to understand the place and environment where everything occurred. Misato is a small city in the Saitama prefecture, about 40 minutes from Tokyo. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, where kids played in the streets and parents weren't afraid to let their children return home alone. Junko Furuta was an exemplary teenager, smart, kind, dedicated. She wasn't problematic or rebellious. On the contrary, she stood out for being very responsible and always maintaining impeccable behavior. Her parents raised her with discipline and strong values, and Junko proudly represented everything that was expected of her. She lived with her family in a modest home alongside her parents and two brothers. Though they weren't rich, they lacked nothing. She was the middle child and had a good relationship with her entire family. In addition to studying, she worked part-time to help out at home. Her future looked bright. She dreamed of having a successful career, starting a family, and living a fulfilling life, and everyone around her was sure she would achieve it all. Junko was also known for her beauty, her lovely smile, and her ability to make friends. Many boys at school were interested in her, and among them, one stood out in particular, Hiroshi Miyano. Hiroshi was an 18-year-old student. Although he attended the same school as Junko, his reputation was very different. He was known for being violent, manipulative, and for hanging around with people of bad reputation. He always wore expensive clothes, drove luxury cars, and did whatever he wanted, as if rules didn't apply to him. Among the students, Hiroshi was almost untouchable. Rumors circulated around the school about his ties to the Yakuza, the Japanese organized crime group. These rumors included extortion, trafficking, and illegal activities. Whether they were true or not, no one really cared. One thing was clear, Hiroshi was not someone you wanted to mess with. One day, Hiroshi approached Junko and asked her out. Junko declined, which caused a stir at school. No one had ever done that. No one said no to Hiroshi. And that simple rejection, which meant little to her, was taken by him as an unforgivable humiliation. That rejection marked the beginning of a tragedy, a disproportionate retaliation, a cruel punishment for not yielding to power and fear. Everything began on November 25, 1988. That day, Junko was riding her bike, leaving school and heading to her part-time job. A teenager named Shinji Minato, following Hiroshi's orders, knocked Junko off her bike. After this, Hiroshi approached her pretending to be the hero, offering to help her. His intention was to impress her, to make her see him in a different light. After helping her, Hiroshi offered to walk her home safely. Of course, that was never going to happen. He deceived her and lured her into an abandoned warehouse. In that warehouse, the nightmare began. Hiroshi assaulted her and threatened to kill her if she screamed or tried to escape. He had no intention of letting Junko go, no matter how much she complied with his orders. When the abuse ended, he took her to a hotel where he continued to force her into acts against her will. Hiroshi felt so proud of his conquest that he decided to call his friends to show off what he had done. Among them was Shinji Minato, the same one who had knocked her off her bike hours earlier, as well as Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe. At this point, his friends decided to follow his example and abuse Junko too. The group of teenagers who had taken Junko captive had previously been involved in a group assault on another girl, but that girl was released afterward. Sadly, Junko would not have the same fate. Around 3 a.m., Hiroshi and his group took Junko to a nearby park, but she couldn't escape. Among her belongings, the group had found her home address and threatened to harm her and her family if she tried anything. The group decided to keep her captive to continue abusing her, but they needed a more private place. So they took her to Shinji Minato's house, located in Adachi, Tokyo, since his parents were out of town at the time. There, Junko was forced to call her parents and tell them that she was okay, and that she had decided to run away with a friend. She was also forced to ask them to stop any police investigations related to her disappearance. Unfortunately for her, this eliminated any last chance of rescue, though at that point, she couldn't even imagine what she was about to suffer. When Shinji's parents returned home, they found a strange girl living there. At first, they were told she was the girlfriend of one of the boys, but eventually they realized she wasn't there by choice. Still, Shinji's parents did absolutely nothing to help her, and even assured the group they wouldn't call the police. Later, Shinji Minato's parents declared that they knew about Hiroshi's ties to the Yakuza, and that they didn't help Junko out of fear that the organization would retaliate against them. They also claimed to fear their own son, who was violent with them. Because of this, Junko remained held against her will, subjected to endless abuse, mistreatment, and other extreme acts of violence, all right in front of them and their indifference. From this point on, I will speak about the hell that Junko Furuta was subjected to. I will try to use softened terms due to platform censorship, but this does not lessen the importance or the severity of what this young girl endured during her final 44 days. During her captivity, it is estimated that she was assaulted repeatedly by approximately 100 individuals, invited by her captors, who treated her suffering as a form of entertainment. She was subjected to extreme cruelty, beaten with all kinds of objects, violated with various instruments, cut, and humiliated constantly. She was not allowed to wear clothing and was forced to drink her own urine to survive. She was also fed live insects, all for the amusement of the group. They made her sit for hours in a freezer, hung her from the ceiling to beat her with different objects, and even used tools to tear parts of her body. She was forced to sleep naked on a balcony during the winter, where temperatures dropped below freezing. One day, after 20 days of captivity, halfway through the nightmare, her abusers were drunk and distracted, so she attempted to call the police. Unfortunately, she was caught and brutally punished. This was one of only 2 times the police were contacted. In the other instance, one of the friends who had participated in the abuse couldn't bear the guilt and told his parents about the girl's situation. His parents called the police, who then went to investigate Shinji Minato's house. When officers arrived at the house where Junko's nightmare was unfolding, they were received by Shinji Minato's parents. In a despicable act, they covered for the aggressors, claiming they had no idea about any girl being held there. They even invited the police in to look around, which led the officers to drop their suspicion, reasoning that if someone was really in danger, why would they let them look? The police declined the offer and left without inspecting the house. Meanwhile, the poor girl continued struggling to stay alive, enduring things that no human being should ever face. Anyone else in that situation would have helped her, but not these 2 people. They chose to stay silent. The officers involved were later dismissed for failing to follow protocol. After the hell Junko endured for 44 days, the tragic final day arrived. That day, the group challenged her to a game of mahjong, a popular tile game in Japan and other Asian countries. Despite being in an utterly deteriorated state, Junko managed to win the game. This was taken as a grave offense by the group, so they beat her and poured flammable liquid on her, then proceeded to set her on fire. Due to this, the dehydration, lack of food, and the endless abuse she had suffered, her body went into shock. She stopped moving and never got up again. The group needed to get rid of the body, so they wrapped her in sheets, placed her inside a barrel, and filled it with cement. Around 8 p.m., they left the barrel in a Tokyo alley, where people often dump construction waste. It was a year later when a construction worker nearby noticed a foul smell coming from the barrel and made the horrifying discovery. When her remains were recovered, it was revealed that Junko had become pregnant, the result of one of the many abuses. In a strange coincidence, the police were interrogating Hiroshi at that time regarding the disappearance of another girl, unrelated to Junko. During the interview, Hiroshi got confused, thinking they were asking about Junko and assuming his friends had already confessed. In a moment of panic, he admitted everything. Believing he had been caught, he confessed in chilling and soulless detail everything that had led to the tragic end of Junko's life. But as harsh as this story is, and despite Hiroshi's confession, justice did not side with Junko. Given the atrocity of the crime, one would expect Hiroshi and his accomplices to spend the rest of their lives behind bars. The reality, however, was devastating. The sentences they received were unbelievable. Despite the horrors they committed, the Japanese justice system treated them leniently. Because they were minors, the severity of their actions was overlooked. The leader, Hiroshi Miyano, received only 20 years in prison and didn't even serve the full sentence. He was released in his 30s, free to start a new life, as if the enormous pain he had caused meant nothing. It's important to note that Hiroshi was already 18 years old when the crime occurred, so his sentence was the harshest of the group. In fact, it was the second longest sentence in Japanese history for a non-life imprisonment case. But what about the other three? Their sentences were ridiculous. They only served 7 years in prison. Upon release, because they were minors, they were given new identities and full opportunity to start fresh. A new life with all the advantages necessary to live peacefully. They could get married, have children, and move on, things that Junko, because of them, would never be able to do. Even today, it's hard to believe that the judicial system allowed these individuals to go on living happy and quiet lives, while Junko, a girl who had done no wrong, suffered unspeakably and lost her future. And the story becomes even more tragic. Instead of recognizing that her son was guilty, Hiroshi's mother blamed Junko for what had happened, believing that because of her, her son ended up in prison. In her twisted mind, Hiroshi was the victim and Junko the villain. So she took it upon herself to vandalize Junko's grave, dishonoring the place where she was supposed to rest in peace. Additionally, Hiroshi's parents were ordered to pay financial compensation to Junko's family, approximately $400,000 US, an amount that could never make up for what Junko had suffered, but at least could have provided some help. Yet once again, reality was worse than expected. Hiroshi's parents did not hand over the money. Instead, they sold their house and gave the proceeds to the other 3 boys who had participated in the crime. Junko's parents received nothing. The money they were supposed to receive never arrived. To make things even worse, Junko's mother ended up in a mental institution. After that, it's impossible to imagine the deep pain of having lost a child in such a brutal way, and knowing that the justice system did nothing to help. Because the offenders were minors, the Japanese justice system kept their identities secret. However, the magazine Shukan Bunshun published the names of the 4 torturers, stating that, given the severity of the crime, they did not deserve the right to anonymity. Despite everything, only one of the 4 managed to lead a relatively stable life. One of them was released in August 1999, and just 6 months later was imprisoned again, for 7 years, for beating a man who had flirted with his girlfriend. Ironically, he received the same sentence as he did for what he did to Junko. Another was arrested in 2018 for beating and stabbing a man in the neck after an argument. He later defended himself by saying that, although he had stabbed him in the neck, he only intended to injure him, not kill him. To close this story, today it is hard to know anything about the lives of these individuals. They all have new lives, new identities, and are hidden from the public eye, living with impunity, while Junko and her family continue to pay for a crime they never committed. Junko Furuta didn't die in a dark alley. She died slowly, surrounded by silence, indifference, and the fear of those who could have saved her. Her story is not just a tragedy, it's an open wound in a society that chose to look the other way. Today, her name lives on, not because of justice, but because we cannot allow something like this to ever happen again. This was the story of Junko Furuta, and this was 44 Days. Good night.